I hope you all have your textbooks open to page 139. Now would be a really good time to go through the key terms given on that page, page number 139. So next we'll be looking at naming compounds. The first thing that I want you to know is if a compound contains a metal, the name of that metal always comes first. We have gone through this in class. I'm just going to quickly go over it as a quick recap. So for example, you have sodium chloride, right? In the first term, you have gone through chapters that talked about what are metals, what are non-metals, right? So I'm sure you are aware of which is the metal in this compound. So we know sodium is the metal and chloride is the non-metal, right? So this is a compound, and you can see that whenever you have a metal in a compound, it is always named first, right? We say we give the name of the metal first in the compound, and then that is followed by the non-metal. So this is rule number 1 that you must know. Secondly, if two elements react to form a compound, the name often ends with "ide," right? We have also gone through this. For example, let's look at magnesium chloride or barium iodide. You don't really need to know all of these, the names particularly, but you just need to know that whenever two elements react together and we have a compound resulting, that name, right, the name that we give that compound, the product, often ends with "ide," right? So you can say magnesium chloride, barium iodide, sodium chloride. So these all are ending with that characteristic "ide," right? So this is rule number 2. A third thing to note is when a compound ends with the term "ate," right? For example, copper carbonate, right? So you have copper carbonate, or you have, calcium sulfate, for example. You can notice that these compounds are ending in that characteristic "ate" term, right? So what does this mean? It means that your compound contains oxygen. So compounds containing oxygen will be named such that they end with this characteristic "ate" term, right? So you have calcium sulfate or copper carbonate, sodium bicarbonate. All these compounds, they contain oxygen. So they are named as such. The fourth key term that I want you to look at is metal hydroxides, right? Here, in place of metal, you would replace this with an actual name of the metal. So, for example, sodium hydroxide or potassium hydroxide. These compounds have a metal. They have hydrogen. Pardon me, just a second. They have hydrogen and they have oxygen. These are the only 3 things combining to give you a metal hydroxide. So in a metal hydroxide, you have the metal, you have hydrogen, that's from where you get the word hydro, and oxide, you have oxygen, right? Apart from this, a PDF was shared with you earlier before we went for the spring break, and that had detailed the key terms on page 139. So we talked about carbonate, we talked about chloride, about sulfates. So I hope you all are going through the notes that you're receiving. They're very important. For now, you can look at the key terms, and I hope you have learned them as well. The final thing that I want to look at is rearranging atoms. During a chemical reaction, the atoms in the reactants rearrange to form the products. Let's see what that means in more detail. In this reaction, we have methane reacting with oxygen to give us carbon dioxide and water. So our products are water and carbon dioxide, and our reactants are methane and oxygen. Using the key below, you can see that the atoms in pink are oxygen, atoms in green are shown as hydrogen, and atoms in yellow are carbon. So the only atoms that we have in this reaction are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, right? Now you can notice that methane is made up of 4 hydrogen and 1 carbon. We have 2 molecules of oxygen, so we have 4 oxygen atoms, right? In our products, we have carbon dioxide is made up of 2 oxygen, 1 carbon, and we have 2 molecules of water. So we have 2 oxygen atoms, 1 per water molecule, and we have 4 hydrogen atoms, 2 per water molecule, right? The first thing that we can pretty clearly see is our atoms are being rearranged. Methane was made up of 4 hydrogen and 1 carbon, right? And it's being rearranged. These atoms in the reactants are completely being rearranged to form new complete products, right? Carbon dioxide contains 2 oxygen, 1 carbon. Water contains 1 water molecule contains 1 oxygen, 2 hydrogen. Since we have 2 water molecules, we are just going to multiply that by 2, right? So we have 2 oxygen and 4 hydrogen. So you can see pretty clearly that during a chemical reaction, the atoms of the reactants they rearrange themselves to form new products, to form new substances, right? The second thing that we can note is that no atoms are lost and no new atoms are formed. We started with carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and we end up with carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. There's no new element, new atom being introduced. We don't suddenly have a sodium or a chloride, right? What we started with, we are ending with those same very atoms. Let's check with our numbers. We have 1 carbon in our reactant. We have 1 carbon in our product. We have 4 hydrogens in our reactants, and we have 4 hydrogens in our product. Then we have 4 oxygens in our reactant. And how many oxygens do we have in our products? We have 2 oxygen in the carbon dioxide and 2 oxygen in the water. So when we add them together, we get 4 oxygen atoms in the products as well. So again, no new atoms are lost. No atoms are lost. We are not destroying any atoms in the process, and no new atoms are formed, right? Suddenly we don't really have an additional oxygen or an additional hydrogen. The numbers remain constant. So I hope you found this recap of chapter 6.1 helpful. I would recommend that you read this chapter again, pages 138 to 141. Again, you have a worksheet after you're done watching this, so I would request you to attempt that as well for your classwork. And if you feel that you're short on time, you can continue it for your homework. We will discuss this in our Zoom class, and I guess that's all. So have a great day, everyone.